nonetheless. What we're really talking about doing is changing the culture in the state of Ohio. This is a culture problem. And the law can inform the culture, and the law can lead the culture. Frankly, it's not just texting, emailing, or scrolling through social media while driving. Many of you have seen these. A few examples. It includes taking a selfie while driving, watching TV or movies while driving, watching a football game while driving, playing video games while driving. Colonel Fambro will show a few examples of these. Colonel?
Thank you, Governor. In the first video, you will see a driver who was stopped after a trooper from the Canton post witnessed him fail to use a turn signal and commit several lane violations. You will then hear the driver admit the violations, stating he was distracted by his phone as he was observed by the trooper playing Pokemon Go. He goes on to admit this is not the first time he has been stopped for distracted driving. During the second video, you will see a motorist make several lane violations, tailgate another vehicle, and travel at speeds in excess of the posted speed limit. Once stopped by the trooper from the Wapakoneta post, you will learn the patrol received a call from other motorists who were concerned as they observed the driver watching TV as he traveled down the roadway. If you look closely to the right of this gentleman's head, you can see the screen of his device mounted directly in front of him on the windshield. The trooper witnessed the driver watching a football game just prior to the traffic stop. If you could go ahead and roll the videos.
Check up.
Hey, sir, how are you doing this evening?
I know, I forgot my turn signal at that one turn.
Yeah, so I see you playing Pokemon Go on your cell phone. So when I got behind you, when you turned over there the street that comes out of the mall parking lot there.
I forgot the I should have waited.
Yeah, well, when you turn, at one point you're driving down the middle of two lanes, okay? And then you get over into the right lane. But you're going super slow, okay?
Right, I apologize. I was distracted.
I know you're distracted. You're on your phone. You can't be playing Pokemon Go while you're driving.
That's why I'm being honest with you.
No, I appreciate you being honest. Do you have your ID on you and registration for the vehicle?
You guys got me for that once or twice before. I won't lie about it.
Yeah, you got to put the phone down. I mean,
I know,
especially
it's very addicting.
I know it's addicting, but you're playing Pokemon Go while driving a 3,000-ton vehicle. It's probably not the smartest thing to do, right?
I knew exactly what it was, so you must get a lot of people that do that.
We get a lot of people who drive on their phone when they're not supposed to, especially if you're playing a video game on your phone. Do you have the registration for the vehicle, sir?
Second video, you'll see a lane violation here. Straddle the lane line. And coming up here, he'll be following this vehicle in front of him so closely you can barely see it. You can see the video screen to the right of the head. Very shortly, he'll be traveling well in excess of the posted speed limit. I believe it was 85 mile per hour in posted 70 mile per hour zone. You can see how quickly he's passing traffic. Many of the violations you see are some of the same violations you see impaired drivers commit.
No, not a whole lot. Do you have your license with you? Get that here real quick. We were just doing 85 and 70 right there, just about half a mile ago. Okay, so initially someone called you and said you were watching TV while you were driving. So I got in behind you down there at the 104, followed you up to the 106, or to the 110 here. Had multiple marked lanes violations where you weren't able to keep it in your lane. You did fail to use your signal when you got off the 75 on the 33 here. So that's why I had you stop. Someone called you and said you were watching TV, which I confirmed that when I got in behind you. I could see the football game going. You can't do that. You can't be watching TV and driving. You need your eyes focused on the road.
It's hard to believe that someone would play a video game or watch a football game while driving, and distracted driving is unsafe and irresponsible. And in a split second, the consequences can be devastating. That is why it is important for law enforcement officers to be able to take immediate action when they observe a distracted driver. Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Well, luckily no one was hurt in these two cases, but many Ohioans have been killed, many Ohioans have been injured because of distracted driving, and many Ohio families have lost loved ones. Some of those families are here behind me today. Sharon Montgomery and her husband John were victims of a distracted driver who was using his phone in 2000. Sharon suffered serious injuries, and John was killed. John and Lois Gordon's son, Rusty, was on his motorcycle when he was killed on Ohio State Route 4 in 2008. A driver distracted by his cell phone hit him head on. Amy Eckert of Middletown was pregnant when she was hit by a driver who was texting. She lost her unborn son and her leg. Kim Warner's sister, Jody Bice, died in a Guernsey County crash after another car crossed the center line. Prior to the crash, the other driver had been texting. Dom T-Berry's daughter, Maria, died while driving in 2013. Something distracted her. She hit the back of a stopped semi on 270. Cherie Hanna lives in Columbus. Her daughter Kendall was texting and driving in 2014. The 20-year-old lost control of her car and was killed. Kathy and Doug Richardson's son Nathan, a captain in the National Guard, was killed while changing a tire on I-77. The driver who hit him was texting. Kathleen Strack's brother and Sarah Strack's uncle was killed in 2015 when he was hit by a semi-driver who lost control while texting. His name was Mark. Now, these are just a few of the examples of what distracted driving can do. And just a few examples of the families whose lives will be, and have been, by that, forever changed. Distracted driving hurts and kills innocent people. It devastates families. Now, although Ohio's current law for texting and driving certainly was well intended, we have found that it simply has not changed the culture in Ohio. Last year, our Ohio Distracted Driving Task Force made a number of recommendations. These recommendations have formed the bills that the two senators will be talking about. We've also sought guidance from the For Ohio Coalition, whose mission is safer roadways. Many members of both groups are standing here with me today, and I thank them for their service. With limited exceptions, the Hands Free Ohio bill will ban the use of handheld wireless devices behind the wheel. It will also give tough new consequences to drivers who choose to break the law. Right now, in Ohio, using a handheld wireless device is a primary offense only for drivers younger than 18. But for adults, it is what's called a secondary offense. That means that today, in Ohio, law enforcement can see a driver texting or emailing. But unless that driver commits another offense, such as speeding or running a red light, that officer can do absolutely nothing. This has to change. The Hands-Free Ohio bill, sponsored by Senators Coonsey and O'Brien, will make using any handheld wireless device behind the wheel a primary offense. Law enforcement, after this bill becomes law, will be able to immediately stop drivers who are using their devices. They will not have to wait until something terrible happens. Hands-Free Ohio will go beyond banning texting, emailing, and social media. Under this bill, it will also be a primary offense for drivers to use a handheld wireless device to do a number of different things, such as watch or record a video, take a picture, live stream, look at images, enter information into an app such as a calendar or search engine, type an address into a GPS, dial a phone, or hold a phone. These will all become illegal. The bottom line, most everything you do with a wireless device while driving will be off limits. We are confident that by taking the phones out of drivers' hands, it will change distracted driving behaviors in Ohio, and we know that this will save lives. There are some exceptions under this bill. If your car is stationary, if your car is stationary, if it's not moving, and outside the lane of traffic, then you can use your device. If there's an emergency, you can pick up your phone and dial 911. But all other calls must be on speakerphone or hands-free mode. Drivers can listen to and dictate emails and text messages, but only if they're using their device's hands-free features. Drivers can still look at their GPS navigation systems, but must punch in the address before hitting the road, not during the drive. There's also an exception for a single swipe, such as for a ride-share drivers who must swipe their device to accept a fare. Now, we'll also pass out a press release that lists some other exemptions as well. Overall, the Hands-Free Ohio bill will eliminate some of the ambiguity in the current law. It will make it easier for law enforcement to stop drivers who choose to risk lives on the roads. We're certainly not doing this so that law enforcement can write more tickets. We're not doing this to put people in jail. We're doing this for one simple reason, and that is to save lives. This bill will save lives. Several other states have already gone hands-free, and many saw immediate and significant drops in roadway fatalities. Senator O'Brien will talk about that in just a moment. These statistics are very enlightening. This can happen in Ohio too. We can see our fatality rates drop significantly, but only if the new law is there as a deterrent. Senator Coonsey can explain the increased penalties that are part of this bill, and I will now ask her to come to the podium, Senator, and do that. Senator O'Brien will then speak after Senator Coonsey.
Well, good afternoon. Thank you, Governor, for your leadership on this issue. Thank you, Colonel, for those powerful videos, and thank you to my joint sponsor, the families, and the groups that are here today. Right now, drivers who violate the texting while driving law can face a fine of up to $150. No matter if the driver causes property damage or kills someone, the fine is always $150. The Hands-Free Ohio bill has a mandatory $150 fine for anyone who uses a wireless device while driving. On the second offense, the fee will increase to $250. If you have 3 or more offenses, you'll be looking at a fine of $500 or more, plus a possible license suspension. If someone is seriously hurt or killed, the penalties will be much more severe, and they'll mirror those faced by drunk drivers. Studies show that distracted drivers exhibit some of the same behaviors as drunk drivers, including slow reaction times, erratic speeds, weaving, and sudden braking. We must make distracted driving as culturally unacceptable as drunk driving is today. Under this bill, if a driver is distracted by a wireless device and seriously hurts someone, they'll be charged with aggravated vehicular assault, and that is the same charge as a drunken driver would face in this situation. Depending on the offender driving history, they'd be facing either 1 to 5 years for an F3 or 2 to 8 years for an F2. If someone is killed, the driver would be charged with aggravated vehicular homicide, which could mean 2 to 8 years for an F2 or 3 to 11 years for an F1. The bill will also increase the number of points drivers would get on their license for speeding while using a device. At this time, it is my pleasure to introduce my joint sponsor, Sean O'Brien, to talk about the points the governor mentioned. Sean?
Thank you, and thank all of you for being here. I want to thank the governor for his leadership, my joint sponsor, Senator Coonsey, the State Patrol, ODOT, and our coalition that you see behind me, the victims here who are going to tell you some of their powerful stories. I think it's so important. But as Governor DeWine mentioned, other states have saved lives by passing these types of laws, and I think this is very important when you look at the statistics that other states have done and what can be done. If you look at Washington State, when they put this law into effect, their fatalities went down 22.3%. West Virginia went down by 23.3%. Hawaii saw a 27.4 drop. California, 31.1 decrease in traffic fatalities. And after 2 years in Washington, D.C., they lowered their fatality rate by almost 50%. In addition, our bill requires ODOT to post signs at each point at intersections or routes or U.S. routes enters into a state so that out-of-state drivers are well aware of our Ohio law. The signs will also go up at each point of an entrance from a commercial service airport onto a public road as well. Just yesterday, I was in Washington, D.C. with Senator Rowley, and we were driving, and we witnessed a car accident, and you could tell the person had something in their hand, set it down, and smashed into 3 cars right in front of us. So it brings it home to see it right then and there. Now, luckily, no one was, it didn't look like a lot of people were, they hit, but no one was seriously injured. But you can see what this means. And I drive from Trumbull County down to Columbus, and I have seen some of the craziest people reading newspapers, looking on their their screens. This is a very important bill that will save lives, and I'm proud to be here. And again, I want to thank everyone for being part of this. Thank you, Governor.
Let me now ask John Gordon to say a few words, then followed by Amy Eckert. What happened to them and the other families here today is really what we're trying to prevent.
Thank you. Governor DeWine, other heads of state and dignitaries, thank you for giving me the opportunity to address this assembly. My name is John Gordon, a retired police officer from Marion, Ohio, with specialized training in motor vehicle crashes through the Ohio State Highway Patrol Academy. I am here to talk about my son, John Travis Gordon, a person we knew as Rusty. His birthday was just 2 days ago, but he will forever be 35. Governor DeWine, Rusty's story started in 1990 when you, as a young U.S. representative, offered him an appointment to the United States Military Academy in West Point. I'll give you a picture. Rusty was unable to compete at West Point due to an eyesight issue. So he decided to follow in the footsteps of his father in the criminal justice system. Rusty's story continued as he became a corrections officer. He graduated from a police academy where I was an instructor. And shortly afterwards, he joined the Upper Sandusky Police Department, while maintaining his career as a corrections officer. Rusty has also been very active in the Boy Scouts of America, having earned the rank of Eagle and the Wood Badge for adults. His time in scouting during his adult years meant spending a great deal of time with his young son, a boy who absolutely idolized him. Then the judge who oversaw Rusty's Eagle Scout Court of Honor offered him the opportunity to become his court bailiff. I had already retired from the police department, and I was a court bailiff for another judge. Rusty and I worked together as the only father and son bailiff team in the state of Ohio. Everything changed around 10 p.m. on May the 18th, 2008, when a young man using his cell phone swerved left to center and hit my son head on just south of Marion County, Ohio. My son was killed instantly by a man who had graduated from the same police academy that my son attended, and that I also taught him during his time at the academy. That man entered a no contest plea in court and received a 20-day jail sentence and a minimal fine. That 5-second text message has required a mother, my wife Lois, who was left behind to see doctors and to take medication daily in order to function. There were children left behind who needed the guidance and love that only a father can give, as they were unsure of their future without their dad being there every day. There are other members of our community who fondly remember our Rusty as a good and kind person. While hands-free is not 100% cure for this addiction, it is a positive step forward. Since the current secondary law has handcuffed law enforcement officers from saving lives, any new law needs to be a primary offense as well as hands-free. As studies have shown, if drunk driving is a 400% increase of a crash risk, texting while driving is a 2,300% increase of a crash risk. Yet we focus our financial resources on OMVI rather than distracted driving. Governor DeWine, you were quoted in 1996, "The death of a child is the toughest thing in life to deal with. It's the worst tragedy you could suffer, and it affects you for the rest of your life." It has, it does, and Becky will never be forgotten. Before I close, Governor, I want you to know Rusty was a leader, yet his voice is not completely gone. As I speak for him in a distracted driving safety program called Rusty Story, where I have presented to over 34,000 people in 4 states since 2012. In fact, my wife and I have made a video for your office when you were the Ohio Attorney General for the purpose of training law enforcement officers. Thank you.
Thank you. Love you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Amy Eckert. I was involved in a motor vehicle accident April 9th, 2011. It was a 2-lane rural road in Alabama. The other person in the vehicle was in excess of speed, crossed left of center, and hit me head on. It's estimated that the impact was over 110 miles an hour. The extent of my injuries left me in the hospital for 6 months. They had to put me in a medically induced coma for 2 weeks. And my son was buried during that time. I was 6 months along. His name was Gabriel, and that is definitely a loss that does not go away. Just since the accident, this is what I do. I like to do spreading the message, making sure everyone is aware of the risk. Something that many of us forget. We're all busy. We all have work. We all have family. Things are important to us. But you have to think, is your life important? Is it worth that text message? And if your life isn't that important to you, think about everyone else's lives around you. Mom and dad's coming home from work. Grandma and grandpa's going home from church. All the kids on that school bus. If your life isn't worth losing, then think of everyone else around you, because it affects everyone, not just yourself. So just take that away from today. This is a very important bill. Governor DeWine is amazing for this, and I'm so glad that there's people out here that fight for the same thing. Thank you.
Now, we know that after this bill passes, there won't be a change in behavior overnight. The sponsors have included a 6-month warning period for drivers. Again, this is about changing a culture. You don't change it overnight. Law enforcement can pull drivers over for using their devices during that period of time, but they will only issue warnings at first. This way, we can educate drivers about the change before it does go into effect. It's also worth noting that although it will take some time for this bill to move through the legislative process, we intend to enact a similar policy for state employees in the next few days. We do not want our employees to hurt themselves or anyone else while driving on the job, so distracted driving will be strictly prohibited for employees of the state of Ohio. More than happy to respond to any questions. Sponsors are here, obviously, and other folks who have testified. And again, I want to close by just thanking all the family members, not just those who spoke, but thank you all for being here. It makes a big difference.
I don't know if this would be a question for Director Vanderbilt or for the lawmakers, but what would be the burden of proof under this bill? Do you have to see a device in order to make the charge? And or is this really just come down to being able to make the stop, even if in the end you don't file a charge?
Well, it's still going to have the same burden of proof that any criminal or traffic case would have. In this case, would be criminal. So we'd still have the same burden of proof. The evidence would still have to be presented whether the officer saw it or what evidence the officer indicated to have to make the arrest or the charge. So that would still go forward. And, you know, whether it's his testimony or her testimony, whether it's the video camera they have, whether if there's a fatality, records need to be subpoenaed to determine if they have text gone out at that time. So it's it would be a totality of the circumstances to ascertain the charge and prosecution of it.
Colonel, anything to add to that?
I'm sorry?
Would the police officer have to obtain the device?
It depends on each situation, not necessarily. I think the evidence is it depends on, does he have a video camera, she have a video camera? You know, the whole, speeding cases, the prosecution's kind of the same. So everything would still have to have that same mens rea and all that. So.
And I think that the thing that's important is that under current law, if a police officer can be driving right by and look over and see this activity, and that officer, she or he cannot do anything unless there is another offense going on, unless that person is weaving or some other offense. And so, in plain sight seeing that, I think the key is that officer is prohibited under current law from issuing that citation. And so by making it a primary offense, it fundamentally changes. Colonel, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
Nothing to add. That was perfect, sir.
You talked of aggravated
It, again, goes back to the evidence. If they can prove those elements of it, then it would be it would be charged as such.
So it is mandatory. If you hurt someone while
Yes.
being distracted, you will be charged.
As long as you can prove it, and just like every case, you have to look at the evidence. Does the evidence dictate that this is what happened?
So it's still discretionary.
It's discretionary as long as it meets the elements of the crime. So if you're able to prove those elements of the crime, then you charge it as such. And then being a former prosecutor, that's how we would look at it. You have to look at each case individually. What evidence is there? What can you sustain in grand jury, and then get it to a actual trial? So,
Sean, you've been a prosecutor more recently than I have, so I'll keep you up here. But vehicular homicide, historically in Ohio, have been, you have committed another offense, and then that leads to. So in other words, you've done something, and so as he said, so this would not. This is not unusual, because we're making this. Once you make this a primary offense, I think it would be expected that it would be treated like other.
absolutely.
You go left of center and you kill somebody, So that is a vehicular homicide, or vehicular homicide of some sort. So no one should look at this as an unusual thing. Once you make this a primary offense, then it's logical that for the homicide, when somebody dies, that you would have that as a component part of it.
To Senators O'Brien, Kinsey, and Governor DeWine, traditionally the legislature has been resistant to adopting laws that it sees as nanny-state or what have you. What's your strategy for convincing them that this is the right move for Ohio?
I'll start. I think if you look at the numbers of some of the states that have done this, really what's at stake is we can pass this and save lives, or we can continue down the pathway we've been going and see more people die. I mean, it is rare. It happens, but it's rare where you can have something that is this obvious and that's been proven by data, where a vote for a bill will save lives. This is a case where a vote for this bill to save lives. A no vote on this bill means we're going to continue down the path that we've been doing, and we're going to see more people die. So.
And that's the problem going second. He steals your answers. But looking at the statistics,
Well, I got to the podium.
the statistics that we've seen from the other states, you're talking about 27% reduction in the fatality rate, 50% in some states. As the governor said, this is about saving lives. And I think the General Assembly, when seeing these statistics and hearing the data, will, I think, support this bill. And I think that, as the governor said, is one of the most important things, that when we can look at other states, see what they've done, see the success, and it's about saving lives. So I think that's how we're going to work it.
How many points would conviction carry on your DMV record?
You know that? I don't know how it's
For the current legislation?
No.
No, I mean, for primary distracted driving, primary offense, how many points?
I think it's two. Double check that for you.
On the warning period, you mentioned 6 months. Is that 6 months from the time the bill passes, or 6 months from the time the bill?
I think the way it's written would be from the time the bill goes into effect.
Okay.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Senator O'Brien and Kinsey, how would your bill interact with cities that already have their own primary distracted driving laws?
Well, I believe the state law supersedes those laws. The state has premises, so we would be in effect. They would have to follow ours or go in conjunction with them, but state law would supersede those.
Would your law be, what if their law is stronger than your law?
Well, again, if the state would be the one that controls. So if there is a conflicting between the two, it's the state law that would control.
Does the bill include preemption language saying that no law would be different from the state law?
No.
Let me just say, again, to state the obvious, that when you want to change the culture, it's very difficult to do it through one city at a time passing a law, because the word just doesn't get out across the state. And it's just important for us to say this is what Ohio is doing, to put signs up so that people come into Ohio, they know what the rules are.
This may be a question for the State Patrol.
spoke with Worthington today, City of Worthington. They passed a city ordinance, which is pretty much exactly what we're talking about here. Primary offense for distracted driving for all drivers within their city. Since 2012, they've only had 21 citations issued in the last 8 years. Their biggest issue is proving it. They will pull someone over, but unless they feel like they have video evidence, it'll be the word of the officer versus the word of the driver, especially when you have exceptions like looking at your GPS. It can be very difficult. How do you address that issue in terms of training officers on the road or equipment you may need in order to get that proof?
I think, again, it comes back to culture and everyone understanding in Ohio this is what it is. Part of it is getting police officers, and once this law goes into effect, you're going to see in training, you're going to be police officers across the state who are going to get training. How do you investigate this type case? Now, it always does come back to evidence. And so what we do with our law, and what we do particularly with our traffic law, it doesn't have the impact just in the cases where we find somebody doing it. It has the real impact is a deterrent. And so you change the culture, everybody knows this is what it is, and my guess is, you can never prove how many lives have been saved in Worthington, but my guess is you've had lives that have been saved in Worthington, irrespective of the fact that maybe there's only 8, as you say, 8 cases that have actually been prosecuted.
Is there a value to an officer being able to pull someone over just to say, put the phone down, give them a warning, and maybe not even give them a ticket?
Well, I think you could, an officer, in these cases, I don't know how these cases were resolved, but an officer, certainly can do that. And what we're doing is we're building into the law for the first 6 months an opportunity for that to happen, and to go from there, really.
I have a question for pretty much everybody up there. How many of you, if you raise your hands, how many of you have lost a loved one in a traffic accident?
To continue that, how many of you admit to texting while driving?
Texting?
Long time ago.
Using the phone.
Long time ago.
Talking on the phone. Talking on the phone. Yeah.
Not anymore.
Let's take a poll out there.
How many of you?
Yeah, how many of you?
Does the same thing?
Oh, no, it doesn't work that way.
We're changing the culture.
Bluetooth.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
Question for Colonel Ambrose. I know that the problem with distracted driving is pretty evident just being on the roads, but Ohio raised the traffic or the speed limit on the highways less than a decade ago to 70 miles per hour. Has that also contributed to the rise in fatalities?
I think it depends on the road. So, there are a lot of factors just overall. I'm sure it has contributed somewhat, but not as much as distracted driving.
Governor, if we may ask some off-topic questions for a second.
I'm shocked that would happen.
The details.
Okay, if I could stop you just for a moment. We've worked this out that if they're difficult questions, that Senator O'Brien will answer them. So
It's tough being in the
Anyway,
minority.
the details of the All-Ohio proposed unified opioid settlement have come out. Are you satisfied with how that is structured, and do you believe the locals will sign off?
I am satisfied. We have not, we don't have a final agreement. And so I'm always cautious by nature and not, you have not seen me talking about this, although I've been seeing a lot of stories in the last couple of days about it. But I am satisfied, and let me explain why. The establishment, first of all, the local communities are going to get 30% right away. 55% is going to go into a trust where the local communities collectively will have control of that as far as the number of votes. by a significant number. I felt it was important to have this money put in this trust because of the experience that we had with tobacco. And I am not criticizing people who made those decisions. The money, well, first of all, what happened, as you recall, is after a few years, the settlement money, the money was monetized. State got all its money. State spent all its money. And I'm sure it was spent for good things. I think a lot of it was spent for schools, and I think that's fine. But here's what we ended up with. What we ended up with in the state of Ohio is very high smoking rates. If I recall the figures, I'm sure someone on my team, Lisa back there, will correct me, but we're at somewhere around national 14% smoking. In the state of Ohio, we're at 20%. Among our Medicaid population, we're in the 40s. So a huge cost. If we don't put aside people's lives, which we should not do, but just in the cost to taxpayers through Medicaid, the cost is huge. One of the main reasons I believe that we still have that high smoking rate is because we have not had the money to spend to change the culture in the state of Ohio. So we don't want to make that mistake in regard to these settlements. This is going to be one-time money. You're not going to sell it twice. You're going to get the money. As you settle with each company, that's all you're going to get out of that company. And so it's important for us to understand that 5 years from now, we may or may not have an opiate problem, but I'll guarantee you we'll have an addiction problem. I started as a county prosecuting attorney or an assistant prosecutor in 1973. We've had an addiction problem as long as I can remember. We're always, we're going to be facing different challenges. And as the drug epidemic morphs and changes, as has this opiate epidemic, we need to be able to have the money to deal with that in the future. And so by setting aside 55% of these settlements, putting it in a fund, and saying that fund is going to be controlled primarily by local governmental units, what we can assure local government is that they are getting the benefit directly of 85% of the total money, which is much higher than anything that has ever been proposed in any other state as far as the locals getting this money. I was willing to say, look, the state needs to pull back if we can get this trust set up, which I believe is absolutely essential to deal with the long-term problems. Having this trust allows for planning. Having this trust allows that group to bring in the best experts they can find about how this money should be spent. Now, as part of the agreement, there's going to be provision that every part of the state is going to have to get money spent on it. But taking a deep breath, setting this money aside, setting this group up, and very intelligently attacking on a long-term basis drug epidemic in the state of Ohio, and having the flexibility as it changes year to year is something that I was willing to say, look, I don't have to control it. Let's put it into this trust. But if we can get a trust, this is the right thing to do. The 15% that would go to the state of Ohio, I told the lawyers, and I've told the mayors and county commissioners and others who I met with several days ago that, look, we may even put part of that into the trust. Having this trust, to me, is the great selling point, and it makes sense, and I think it's clearly the right thing to do. So I'm very much in favor of this. It's not done yet. We think we're close to having it done. I'm fairly confident that we're going to get it done. If Ohio does this, we will be the first state, I believe, to do it, and by having a united front where we can go, the lawyers, not me, but the lawyers can go and talk to these different companies and say, if you settle with us, you get everybody in Ohio. You can take that off the table for you. I think that gives us a premium. I think we end up getting more money in any kind of settlement. And finally, no one should believe that having this settlement means that any of these lawsuits are going to go away. These lawyers will continue to push these lawsuits, but it puts us in a better bargaining position if these companies want to exercise some good faith and actually negotiate with us for a settlement. It gives us a much better opportunity to have a settlement, and it gives us a better opportunity to have more money in the settlement. But we're not pulling back. The lawsuits will continue. If they don't settle, the cases will go to trial. So I'm very enthusiastic about this plan, and it's the right thing to do for Ohio's future.
How much buy-in do you need from the local governments to make this work? And are you telling them that if they don't sign on, that their chances of getting money become worse?
Well, I will tell you what I told them the other day, and I truly believe this. And my experiences in regards to when I was in the United States Senate, we had big issues in regard to asbestos. And what you found is there's never enough money, and if you don't reach some big settlement, what you end up with is everybody's playing the lottery, which simply means that some cities may hit it and some cities may not hit it. Some people may end up with a good payday, some may end up with zero. Because the other thing that is going on is these companies, depending on the settlements and depending on how this plays out, these companies are, going to be running out of money. And so the question is, can we get a settlement? Everybody gets a fair amount, and people can walk away with that from that and know that that's going to continue, or do they just want to take a chance and roll the dice and see if they hit it or don't hit it? No.
Do you think the 11% off the top for the attorneys representing local governments plus whatever the state's going to pay, is that reasonable for attorneys?
I'm not aware that we have settled on any particular amount of money for the attorney fees. Again, my team has been working on this. Look, the states, what the state pays for attorneys has been set by the state legislature in a bill that was passed when I was Attorney General with my support, where we set that out. You also, though, have cities and villages that had negotiated their own deal long before we got involved in any kind of discussions. So the settlement and what the lawyers get has got to be enough to keep everybody together. And so I'm not going to get into what the details it's going to take or what the sweet spot is as far as what ends up them getting. No.
We can take one more question.
Governor, there's a group of conservatives coalescing to call for repeal of death penalty. This group includes the likes of Bob Taft, former Congressman T. Berry, etc. Have you had any change in your heart relative to seeking a repeal of capital punishment?
This is the law in the state of Ohio today. I don't have any comment beyond that.